like to do now is talk very briefly, because I can see that tea is arriving, about some of the research that we've very recently done in the Centre for Social Informatics. Where this started was in 2012. We did a survey of every community council online presence, its website, blog, Facebook, Twitter account, whatever we could find. That was in summer 2012. I did the grunt work, and Peter supervised and kept me on track. Thank you again for all of that. Can I go to the next slide? Okay. You can see what we found in 2012. About 16% of community councils don't even exist. Under 40% exist but have nothing online that we could find. A quarter of community councils did have some form of online presence, but it was out of date. Nothing had been added to it in the last two months. So no minute. We chose that to allow people adding minutes after they've been ratified at the next meeting. And then using that quite generous definition of out of date, up to date, we found under a quarter of community councils were online and had up to date websites. Next slide. And then we repeated the survey and found, to within experimental error, shall we say, almost exactly the same result. And that was a little surprising, a little disappointing, as speaking as a practitioner. And so we wanted to delve into this a bit. And so, can I have the next slide? We looked at the changes for each community council between the 2 years. I won't go through this full table, as I'll be putting this publication out onto Knowledge Hub. I should say that you'll later on, probably over the weekend, I'll be sending out information to everyone to join the Knowledge Hub group, which was an online home for discussing things and where we hope this conversation will be. So what found in total were 160, shall we say, positive changes where a community council moved from not existing to existing, or from its presence being out of date to up to date. But that was far outweighed by the number of what I'm terming negative changes. There were 300 of the changes, and the one I'm going to highlight is that if a community council moved from existing but not being online to having a presence which was out of date, that's a negative step for me, because it says that that community council has tried to go online and failed within 2 years. And the headline there is that 34% of presences over those 2 years degraded or disappeared. So, can I have the next slide? So, my favourite book cover is asking, what can be done? And this is why we've got some funding for an initiative.
Hands up, who gets it? I think one or two people are laughing. Who recognises the reference?
Can't read it. Maybe that's all.
It's, if I can pronounce it correctly, it's Chol Dilat.
Right, it's our friend Vladimir Lenin. That was his planning how to take over the world.
Honestly, I'm not planning to be a dictator. And so we got funding for an initial project, part of which was looking at the Twitter initiative you just heard about, but the other part was looking at 3 neighbouring community councils in the Scottish city, and seeing if there is a community of practice around their digital engagement work. And the community of practice, its formal definition, is a group of practitioners, a group of people who do the same sort of activity, who help each other get better at what they do by frequently contacting each other and co-learning, sharing skills, teaching each other, building knowledge. And I can give you a couple of examples from my own practitioner work. Working on a community council website, I got a suggestion from the person who was eventually going to write it. Oh, why don't you do this to get the result you want? And she knew nothing about WordPress, but just came up with a suggestion, and it worked. So I learned something from someone who was brand new. Also, recently, I worked with someone who is not a practitioner, doesn't get involved in the digital engagement, but gave me technical skills to show how to add live tables about, in this case, about planning activities to a WordPress website. And so, look, we did lots of interviews and talking to people and found out that there is a community of practice. There are people who are practitioners, who share skills a bit, but it's patchy and quite fragile. One of the things happened is someone resigned from the community council, and that broke off a bit of the community practice. But you also found it's surrounded by a community of learning. That is, people who don't actually practice, who don't even get involved in the day-to-day bits of digital engagement, but they can share skills, and they have an interest in it. And outside that, there is the shared interest bit, what we call what we have termed a community of interest, where that's people like citizens in your community council areas, and Scottish Government Improvement Service, local authorities, community council liaison officers, who all have an interest in community councils doing digital engagement, but aren't actually practicing and not necessarily sharing knowledge and experience. The other thing we found is that there's no active knowledge management. There are no formal ways of capturing the knowledge and making it available to other people in any way. Because, as you know, in Edinburgh, the biggest danger is that you're going to fall under a tram, and if that happens to be, all my knowledge goes away and isn't available to others. So we're quite interested in this idea of knowledge management. Can we move on to the next slide?
Mm-hmm.
The other things we found is that the linking up of this community of practice building things did make a positive difference, and the links were obviously across community council boundaries. We found it was a way of people feeling supported so that they would carry on doing what they did, that there was some knowledge exchange and even building knowledge, so not just learning what someone else knows, but discovering something new of how to do things. And that leads me to a very tentative suggestion that, say you are the digital engager for your community council, and you're going on holidays or something like that. Maybe someone from neighbouring community council that you trust could step in if you don't have colleagues within your community council to keep digital engagement flowing. Can we move on? Okay, and so having learned from that there is this community of practice, even though it's a bit fragile and patchy, what we'd like to work towards is to build and strengthen community of practice in other areas of Scotland to see what else is going on. As I say, we only looked at 3 neighbouring community councils in one Scottish city. We'd like to go on and see if there is potential for sharing practice, sharing knowledge all across Scotland to build a resilient network that can help all community councils really communicate with citizens, communicate with the local authorities and other people who need to hear community messages. And so that's the main underlying aim today, is to get people talking to each other, building the relationship, and build this ideal network. And the next one is just to say thank you again for being here, for listening to all of this. We welcome suggestions and questions by any means, including tweeting via the hashtag, that's from the hash digiCC. or emailing myself and Peter, and also, as I say, through the knowledge hub. So I'll say thank you, and any questions?